Hello，大家好，又係我阿番。好啦，大家都可能都聽過喺美國明尼蘇達州嘅首府聖保羅，其實上個月開始咧就不斷被 hacker 攻擊啦，咁就攻擊緊一啲嚟市裏面一啲嘅網絡嘅保安系統啊，甚至乎攻擊嚟可能圖書館啊、WiFi 系統啊、政府 payment system 啦，早過一兩日啦，甚至出現大規模嘅 ransomware attack 啊。即係將好多嘅電腦咧加密，跟住之後勒索咁樣，其實就事件就不停喺咁發酵啦，亦都唔知再會唔會有啲新嘅唔同嘅網絡攻擊出現咗啦。但係希望盜亦有道啊，千祈唔好攻擊一啲民生用品，例如咩消防啊、水電啊咁樣嘅啫。咁如果想知道事態發展成點樣咧，其實大家都可以上網繼續睇下嘅。
Had a chance to watch yesterday afternoon or maybe read some headlines, you saw that we got quite a bit more information from St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter on that cyber attack / ransomware attack in St. Paul. It happened a couple of weeks ago. If you remember, it triggered a state of emergency, which they're still in, by the way. The National Guard's IT units were activated, and we really didn't know a whole lot for the first week or so, other than it shut down most of the city's online services, things like 911, those things still working just fine. But now more information has been coming out, kind of almost like a fire hose in the last couple of days. Mayor Melvin Carter sharing a lot more, including who's behind it, what they have, how much they have, they think, and what they're doing with it. Joining me now is Eric Brown with IT Audit Labs. Also was a Chief Information Security Officer at one time for Ramsey County. Been in the trenches in situations like this, Eric. Thank you for joining us again.
Welcome. Thank you for having me, Amy.
So Mayor Melvin Carter, rattled off a lot of information. We had a live news conference yesterday during the newscast, and it started with numbers about terabytes and gigabytes and things. So I want you to help us decode some of that. But I want to start with who is behind this? What do we know?
Sure. So what we know, or what's being reported, is it's the Interlock ransomware group. And this is a group that's been fairly prolific since last fall. I'm seeing indications that they've attacked over maybe 25 or 30 different businesses around the businesses, school districts, and governments around the United States, and a couple in the UK as well.
So how hard is it to track them down?
Well, I think you really only know who the attacking entity is when you get that ransomware note, or you find the indicators of compromise that they use to go after an organization. So a group like Interlock, they have some custom developed software that they use to install on the victim's computers. And that kind of leaves a signature of who is actually trying to steal this data.
Okay. Now the city initially, Mayor Melvin Carter said there was no ransom involved. We knew there were bad actors, but he said there's no ransom. And then in time now we clearly know that there was ransom. He also says the city has not paid any ransom. Does that make sense to you, that train of information that we've gotten?
Well, it's interesting. And a group like Interlock, they'll do a double ransomware technique where they'll steal data, and that's what happened in St. Paul, where it's been reported that so far about 43 gigabytes of data has been stolen, and that data was held for ransom. And if the organization didn't pay, then that data is released, which I think is what we're seeing happening. And then systems within the organization too can be encrypted. So it's that double level. It's the encryption piece, which locks you out of systems. And then it's the data theft and holding that data as ransom.
Okay. And we learned, I think it was the city's park and recreation shared server information that's now been posted online. When you talk about 43 gigs, I mean, can you help us understand, is there any way to put that in context of how much information that is?
It's quite a bit of information. Maybe just to put things into perspective, these days, most mobile phones have around 32 to maybe 64 gigs for kind of an average phone. Some can go up to a terabyte, but for the most part, that's a good round number. Your operating system on your computer can be around 60 gigs. So it is a lot of data. It could be thousands of movies worth of data, depending on how large that movie file is. But it's certainly not a small amount of data when you talk about files like Word documents or Excel sheets. What could contribute to the larger size is if there are a lot of image files, so city planning files or images that the threat actors may have stolen. That can be large amounts of data.
Okay. I think the mayor yesterday was saying anything from, he didn't seem too alarmed at the type of information that was out there as far as, social security numbers and things like that. That didn't seem to be what's out there. What seemed to be, he said everything from images, drafts of just documents internally that weren't, were relatively benign. Things like recipes, even, anything that would have been on there. But I guess my question is, so they haven't paid the ransom, and there's the 43 gigs that's been posted publicly. Is this then typically the starting point for the bad actors? Do they ramp things up, and is it possible they have a lot more and maybe more sensitive information, and they're just going to see how far they can go to get what they want?
Hopefully this is all they have, but typically they'll usually issue a threat to pay, and if payment isn't received, then they'll release some data, and they may threaten that they have more data, and they may be sharing what they have privately through the cyber teams that are working on behalf of St. Paul and doing that negotiation with the threat actor. But typically they will release some data and then try to hold back data that might be more valuable in order to have that ransom paid.
Okay.
And hopefully that's not the case here.
Yeah, absolutely. One more just quick question, and I know this may not be under your purview exactly. I know the FBI is leading this criminal investigation, but in cases that are similar in magnitude like this or type, in Texas City, what could a success rate be for catching the bad guys in something like this? Because it seems like it would just be almost impossible.
It is really tough, especially when you have entities that are working overseas and behind different countries that have different laws. I do know that the FBI and our law enforcement teams do maintain and they do track these threat actors. And oftentimes you will see that years later an arrest has been made for something that was done years before, because they are actively trying to monitor and catch these people.
Okay. You and I have talked about the collateral damage that happens here, especially financially. And we saw yesterday, the first day of thousands of city employees physically walking into Roy Wilkins Auditorium to get their passwords reset. I don't know, you can't put a number on it, but what is the cost here? Time lost, inability to access city online services, the mitigation, proactively adding protection moving forward. What does this all mean for the city of St. Paul on a sort of a bottom line budget answer?
That's a great question, Amy. And it's no doubt going to be expensive, and hopefully they'll get some assistance from the federal government or state government to augment some of their finances related to this. Certainly there may be an insurance play where insurance steps in, and some of that the communication that have been coming out from the offices are typically issued in conjunction with what the cyber insurer wants to release to the public, because there may be some back-end conversations going on with the threat actors. So oftentimes you don't always get the full story up front because there are legal teams involved, there are insurance teams involved, and that information is sometimes kept a little closer and then released later when appropriate.
Wow. Well, Eric, thank you for jumping on here and just kind of giving us some insight into this and making it understandable, because there's so much here that is hard to keep track of, and it's a world that we really haven't had been exposed to at this level here, a lot of us. So really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy.
All right. Eric Brown, IT Audit Labs. All righty.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here. Over the past 2 weeks, our city has responded to a cybersecurity incident that has demanded constant attention from our IT teams, department leaders, and partners at every level of government. We detected this intrusion on July 25th and began working immediately with the FBI, the Minnesota National Guard, the Department of Homeland Security, and other cybersecurity experts to investigate, limit damage, and protect the people and services that keep St. Paul running. 3 days before we discovered the breach, the Federal Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, published a public advisory about the exact criminal group responsible for this attack. The advisory describes a sophisticated, money-driven organization known for stealing and selling massive volumes of sensitive information from large corporations, hospitals, and governments, operations that have resulted in stolen data measured in the terabytes. Today, that group posted online what they allege to be approximately 43 gigabytes of stolen data from City of St. Paul systems. The City of St. Paul hosts more than 153 terabytes of data on our servers. In other breaches by this group, they have stolen and sold terabytes, thousands of gigabytes, from a single victim. The files they posted appear to come largely from a single shared network drive used by our Parks and Recreations Department, a place where individual employees have stored their own personal files over time. These are not core city systems like payroll, permitting, or licensing. The contents are varied and unsystematic. They could include everything from work documents, copies of IDs submitted for HR or travel, or even personal items like recipes. In other cases, this group has demanded ransoms and then sold data for profit. In this case, after we refused to pay the ransom, they chose to post the data publicly without trying to sell it. While the scope of what they published against us is far smaller than what they've accomplished elsewhere, the fact remains, someone was inside our systems. And once that happens, there's no way to guarantee that they could not have accessed more. I've directed our Department of Talent, Equity, and Retention to offer at no cost 12 months of credit monitoring and identity theft protection insurance to every full-time, part-time, and seasonal City of St. Paul employee, whether their data was released in this breach or not. This investment reflects our commitment to take care of our city workforce the exact same way we would all expect someone to take care of us and our families. At the same time, our technical response to this intrusion continues at full speed. Operation Secure St. Paul, our citywide password reset and device security operation, has now completed in-person password resets, credential verification, and security scans for more than 2,000 city employees. We've installed advanced security software on 90% of all unique city devices, dramatically increasing our ability to detect and block threats in real time. And we've worked over the past 2 weeks, our teams, in close coordination with the Minnesota National Guard and FBI and private cybersecurity experts, have worked to carefully pore through every server, every system, every application that we host to ensure their integrity and their safety. This work will continue until we have completed security upgrades on every device and account, reviewed every system, and strengthened every public policy needed to protect our people and the services they deliver. City services remain online and intact. Our top priority from the beginning has been, as we have shared with you over and over, to ensure that 911 services remain uninterrupted, that residents can continue to rely on their city services, whether that's the police officers, the firefighters and paramedics who show up when we call 911, whether that's the lifeguards and rec employees who run our parks and our libraries and our librarians, or the employees who process permit applications and things like that. Those employees are operating very strongly, very creatively, and very capably, and oftentimes without some of the applications or